So I want to welcome everyone to tonight's NEMS webinar. This is the fourth in the series. And Deb Aldo will be talking about the skills you need for public and community projects and school residencies. I'd like to turn the microphone over to Deb. She is our distinguished speaker and a founding member of the New England Mosaic Society. So Deb.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for stopping in this evening. As Amy just said, my name is Deb Aldo, and I have been a mosaic artist for a very long time. It's been a constant in my life for 4 decades, actually, and I've been working at it for 22 years. It's been a source of creativity, connection, and community for all that time. I'll start with where I got started and head to where I am now. I got started when I was 17 years old with a visit to the Louvre. That was my first mosaic. And I looked at it and my hair stood on end and I said, oh my God, I'm gonna do this. But it took decades to get back to it. Looking back through the decades, I now see a pattern and I can connect the dots, which is more than I could see at the time. But each move led me closer to mosaic being completely entrenched in my life. I spent 8 years learning before I actually became a professional. I was a hobbyist. It turned into a 3-pronged profession, making, teaching, and facilitating. Which is both applicable to public art and community art. My background is that I have an art and design degree, and I also have a landscape architecture degree, which I am quite sure is the reason that I found working large scale as easy as I do. Well, that's the wrong word, but you'll see. So this project, most of my major projects started in Boston. This is actually Todd English's house for any of you foodies. On the lower left, you can see the mosaic. This project was in place in 2008, and then the market fell through the floor. So it was a little harder to get jobs. But in order to get a public art project, I'm going to talk very cursorily about big points, not the minutia. How to get a project. You can Google calls for public art. You can even put in near me, in the state that you want, Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, and there are several other. So you can see those on the screen here, cafe call for entries, Google, Google, Google. And this is a great book by Lynn Bassa. I love this book. It's extremely helpful. So moving up the ladder, you're going to start anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 is the starting range for projects. What I would actually advise you do is just do a few for free, just to get the learning experience. Moving up, you go from about 30 to 90, and then you work in the 6 figures. It took me a long time to get into 6-figure projects, but that's what the last couple have been. So as far as that goes, you need to cover your behind, meaning you need insurance. You need insurance and you need contracts. The municipality that you're working for will provide you a contract. You won't provide them a contract. That would be surprising. Read it, have a lawyer read it, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't want to find out when it's too late. This project was built in 2015. This was an invitation to me from the economic development director. She knew that I was a Tiffany devotee, as was she. We wrote a grant to get this project. The reason this project is here is it ties into another thing that you need to do with public art. As an artist, you have to have insurance. This whole project was demolished completely, and I had to rebuild it. You can't do a project nowadays without actually having insurance. And I started off with a $1 million policy, and I now have a $10 million policy. You're obligated to have that coverage. We don't have enough time here to talk about shipping. Let's just say that that is expensive, and the bigger the project and the farther away it is, the more complex it can be. This is a 2016 project. This was the longest one at that point that I had ever done. It was 200 and change feet of 2 different types of spirals. You can see the CAD drawing on the left-hand side and the image on the right-hand side. And this was dalle de verre set into a stainless steel channel lit with LEDs. So this project was about an hour away from me. And if you're not a travel fan, this could be really hard. I did this, it took a month to build this. So every day I commuted south and then came back home. But New England is not a mecca for public art. There are other parts of the country that are better. We have serious weather issues here. And in addition to that, there are a lot of artists looking for projects. Just an example, I submitted to Worcester Polytech for a temporary project, and 600 other people applied. I didn't get that project. This is another spiral. This construction started in 2016 for a very, very large 4-year project that I am just now finishing up. It'll be done in December. This was 3 times the largest size of any mosaic I had ever done. And if you look at the image on the left, that blue part right there, that was 265 feet long. It weighed 3 tons. And when I mentioned shipping, I had to pack and ship that. So I picked up 6,000 pounds myself with other people 5 times. So it's pretty physical. Took me 3 months full time with 4 or 5 assistants, and I got to give a shout out to Beth and Thomas, even though they may never see this. So getting into public art, this is a great opportunity for a new career, but it's not the path for everybody because, as I just mentioned, there's a lot more rejection than acceptance. Also, bureaucracy is totally endemic. It's rife. Only a small portion of your time will actually be in the studio building. You need to be dealing with logistics. You need to manage staff and crew. And there's all other matter, which I will talk about right here. So all materials have to be approved. It's usually by committee. Everybody has their own opinion. You have to provide samples. They go through an approval or a rejection process, and then you have to make revisions, and you need to do research on that. One of the things about public art, and I'm going to just take a little detour here, up on the screen is Public Art Archive. This is a really great resource to give you some visual information on what projects look like. But before you start, answer some of the temporary calls just to learn by doing. Understand the life cycle of the work. This project was in Florida. Other than salt and superheat, it's not going to be subjected to freeze thaw the way it would here. Artwork outdoors are subject to much harsher conditions than anything interior or any gallery work would be. This is the project once it was installed. That was really nice to see. So as far as public art goes, if you need help, ask for it. Public art administrators are always looking for new artists, and they will specify emerging artists. If you get a chance, go to a dedication ceremony for a piece of public art in your area. It's really good because it gets you into the loop. They have a name to associate your questions with. But again, be willing to make a lot of concessions. There's a lot of revisions on the art, and there are a lot of people involved with this, and there are a lot of moving parts. The great part is hundreds of thousands of people see it. This is another project for Hollywood. This was built in my studio almost exclusively by me. It was 10 feet across, 26 molds, all of which weighed over 100 pounds. The long photo in the middle are some of the materials, and the images on the right, other than the butterfly. The photo on the upper right, they decided they wanted it to be really realistic, and I was kind of hoping we could go something funkier like the image on the bottom. So again, you have to like logistics. As a newer public artist, you're likely to land commissions in lower ranges. Use it as a learning experience. And as always, tie your previous experience back into the application for the current call. This is what that pelican looked like once it was completed. This install went fine, but it was so hot, it was in the 90s, 93, 94, and the cement that I was using to fill the joints with cracked as soon as I put it on there. Back to applications for public art. Read it, review it, read it again. Administrators create these detailed applications for a reason. Make sure that you have a resume and images set up and ready to go. Be clear on dates and deadlines. Also be clear for what they're asking for. If they ask you for an interior piece and you give them exterior, or they ask for painted panels and you decide that you want to put a mosaic together, you'll be disqualified. And you aren't going to get any reason for their disqualification 98% of the time. I've only heard 1 or 2 people ever give me any reason. This is yet another project from the Florida Commission. This was a 7 by 9 foot project. It had 26 sections. It went through 8 revisions before they finally approved the design. These are some of the works. If I go back to this, you can see on the outer ring some of these elements. That's what this is. So there were mosaic inside of mosaics. So this is one example of an installation issue. If you look on the left-hand side, that CAD drawing spec'd a 5 foot by 10 foot oval, and what I was told to build was 7 by 9 feet. So they had to rip the whole thing apart, everything right here, to widen this out and to narrow it up a little bit. This is what that project looked like when I was done. This is standing in my studio taking a picture of it. In conclusion, for public art, this again was another invitation. It was private fundraising. This is for UMass Oncology. They wanted a garden, but people who have cancer can't really be around plants. So if you note the floor, the walls are stone, glass, there's no fabric, no curtains. But this was very near and dear to my heart because the year they asked me, I actually lost 4 friends to cancer. So this was and still is a particular favorite. But the man on the left was receiving treatments. And so not in this picture, but people put their hands all over this. And in all the time it's been in there, I've never replaced more than 3 stones, which is really quite great. Moving on to community projects and school projects. These are the 5 things that after thinking about it, you really need the most. You need to be a leader. People need to trust you and have confidence. And you need to know how to do what you're going to do. You have to be a planner and an organizer. You have to coordinate a lot of people, expenses, timelines. You need to work with others. Community projects and school projects are not solo affairs. So it's really helpful to have people skills. Know your skill set and your limitation and your volunteers also. If you're not a good designer, get somebody else on your team who's better than you are. If you hate installations, have people help you with that who you know are better than you are. You have to have initiative and be innovative. And the time to be innovative is before and during the approval process for this, because it requires, as do public art, a significant amount of problem solving. This is a project from 2012. Again, these things on the bottom, dosomething.org is kind of for younger people. Volunteermatch.org is an amazing website. You can put your projects up on it, and you can find projects. In this particular case, I am a certified teaching artist with the state of Connecticut. Other states do have artist lists, and so you can find your, in Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine, they don't really have statewide things. They have localized things, but you have to just look, Google public art in the state that you're looking at to find out if there is a list that you can get on. This was another community project. This is probably 4 or 5 years old. This was also in Hollywood, but this was in LA, Hollywood. I had the amazing pleasure of working with Luce Mactarini and Dawn Mendelson, and I'm hiding out over here. These people were from, they own a business called Piece by Piece, but these people were all homeless. They were all pulled off the street. Not one of them had ever done a community project in their life. This was the beginning for them, and they had certainly never done pebble mosaic. And we did this in 2 days, and it went into their new building. So again, just an overview on community projects. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Know your talents. How many people do you need, or how many people are you going to have that come with this project? Timeline, deadline. How is the project going to be funded? They're not all funded, so you have to sort of be able to research that also. How much money do you need to raise if you have to? And do you have any materials? Fortunately, since we're all hoarders, that's probably the least of our problems. This was a project that I did for teaching artists and in hot schools, which is higher order of thinking. We were at a week-long conference, which was 5 days. I had 4 days from 8 p.m. until midnight after an all-day conference that was like 6 in the morning till 6 at night. But I had 200 people that were at this conference, and this was their entertainment. This was two 2-by-4 foot panels, and we got it done, as you can see on the lower right, the image on the lower right. So recruiting volunteers. In this particular case, we had volunteers, but you can advertise in online forums. You can always suck family and friends into these things, and you can put it up on Facebook. This was the Nathan Hale School. This was 2018. Teacher on the left, Jeffrey Wolfson, went to France. He studied Giverny. So this was an abstracted impressionistic painting by 50, 10, and 11-year-olds, and this took several months, and we did have to recruit volunteers for this. But again, we had a very specific timeline and time frame that this had to be built, and then the school had an unveiling ceremony, which was really fun. This is one of my favorite community projects. This is Guatemala. Every year, Cindy, who I work with on this project, has been there 6 times. This will be my 2nd time. We take people down. It's a pay it forward. People learn how to do this. They can take these skills back to their own communities and do this. You learn everything about how to put one of these projects together, how to lead it, how to do it, and how to install it in a 5-day period. This person on the left is Beth Klinger, also a NEMS member. When we were down there, we got permission for a wall. This was by a local Guatemalan. And they gave us more wall than we had mosaic. So what Beth ended up doing was creating this strip right here. And these leaves represented one of each 18 people that worked on this mural. And it was just a really sweet surprise, and she took it all on her own, and Cindy and I were both very grateful. This is one of the last projects. The inside of these flowers, the flowers were bought online. The inside were made with glass, which was donated. by 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, 20 of them. This was a 6-week project. We did 5 different types of artwork, and then this was their graduation day. So these are all the teachers and myself in the blue, and these are all the kids. And it's a little hard to see, but we did 5 different projects for 5 weeks, and then the 6th week, we set up all the projects outside. So going back to community projects, there's lots of information online. You can go to schools, hospitals, hospice, places of worship. If you ask and you put that intention out there, you will find a project. So now it's time to do that project. In conclusion, my life really has been transformed through Mosaic. It's been a huge part of my life for decades. I decided to create a business building mosaics. 20 years later, I'm still at it, and I'll probably be at it for another 10, though maybe not 20 more years. If you like to travel, this will definitely be for you. It is worth it for the creativity, but again, as I mentioned, there's lots and lots and lots of other moving parts that have to be addressed. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you have some good questions. Lots of info on the webs, just pick a search engine. Thank you, and as you can see, my email is on the bottom.
Emily? Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? Okay, one moment.
Okay, you guys, this is like having a party and nobody comes. Someone has to have a question.
So I'm definitely interested in hearing questions from other people, but while we wait and you all think about what you'd like to ask, I was curious. First, I was curious about how much of the design process ends up being yours and how much is done in close collaboration with either the group that's commissioning the work or community groups that you work with. And as a result, I'm wondering how much you feel like the final product is really yours to own.
Most of the time with both public art and community art, I think that I come through in that project, but as I said before, it is really about concession and working with them, because it is not about me, it is about them and what they want. So we sit down and I ask them what they want. I bring samples of materials. You know, do you want this to be stone? Do you want this to be glass? Then we talk about what an image looks like, and sometimes they're actually art teachers, which is really helpful because then it really is a collaborative process. But in the end, it's always me that's giving them the drawings, and sometimes I'll put some additional items in that they weren't necessarily thinking about, which work out well. And there usually is a give and take, anywhere from 2 or 3 times to one of the projects that I did in Florida. I think there were 17 revisions, and it was an amazingly simple project that went through an awful lot of revisions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have quite a few questions, so thank you, everyone. All right, so why don't we start out? Maria is wondering if you can, where we can find out more about the trips to Guatemala. Email
me. It's full for 2020, so we'll put you on the list. I can't believe it's full already, but it is an amazing project. It's really fun. Everybody that goes loves it. So send me an email. If we have any bailers, we'll put you on the list and you can go this year. Well, 2020.
Right. Great, thanks. And Annette is asking, what did you do when the concrete cracked during your installation in Florida?
You mean after or before I started crying?
Well, maybe both.
I kind of had to grind it down, and I may have to go back. You know, oddly enough, that was one of the things that really bothered me. They were very, very slight fissures. It wasn't going to affect the integrity of the project. It just was terrifying to see that as soon as I was filling joints, they were cracking. So I went back over it with some glazes and some fillers. Mm-hmm. And I don't, you know, I'll hear back from the city if they have a problem with it, but chances are good that they won't, because that was 6 or 7 months ago.
That's a good sign.
Yes, it is.
All right. So Cassie is wondering about the process for getting, process and some information about getting insurance for a public art project. She says she has business insurance to cover the contents of the studio. So the question is, would she go to her business insurance for a public art project or another source?
I have a broker. Generally, when I do, most of the time public art, you'll have to talk to, you know, if it's a community or a church, you can sort of get an addendum to their existing policy. It's not quite the same as public art. You know, with public art, you have to get an umbrella. Sometimes with smaller projects, school projects and community projects, you don't need it, and it's a blessing. It really is, because it's expensive. And it's hard for them because they can't put us in a box. They don't know how to categorize this. You know, they want to put you in as a mason or a tiler, and you're not.
So in that case, you're talking about business insurance, not necessarily for the art itself, correct?
No, I am talking about the art itself.
Okay,
if
but
you
they
are
still have to categorize you?
And you get into an accident, you need to make sure that you have shipping coverage. Meaning, if you built this in your studio and you bring it to a church 20 miles down the road and a semi runs you off the road, you need to know that's covered. But it is business insurance, and it is through your business.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another question from Maria. If we don't have CAD skills, do you think that hand-drawn sketches would work?
Absolutely. I used to use CAD, and now I actually don't like using it anymore, so I hire somebody. But people love to see hand-drawn things. It's helpful to know how to draw to scale. There's not really time to explain how to do that, but you can do that with a regular ruler. But people love sketches. That's how I do everything before we actually get down to brass tacks and I have to submit for approvals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's comforting. So Karen has a question about how difficult pebble mosaics are to form a yard or a garden path.
Oh, nowhere near what I showed you. It's pretty easy. It's very heavy. They're all heavy, but you make molds. You put some stuff at the bottom of the mold so that you have what's called a rebate, which is the difference between the top of the stone and the top of the concrete. You put them in upside down, and then you pour a couple different kinds of cement in, and it's much easier. I'm missing a few steps for lack of time.
Maybe that can be your next webinar. Yeah. All right, so we can come back to that if we have time, because I'd like to hear in a little bit more detail, but there are a lot of other questions, so let's see. Maya is wondering, do you know if there are any projects going on in Boston that need volunteers? Maybe that's a question for all of us. We can post. You can feel free to type your answer.
I get public calls. There was one, I think the one that I just sent you, there was something in there that looked like a really interesting project. So what you would do is you would Google public art calls in Boston, and then you find out who gets the project, who got the project, who was awarded that. But what I would do before you're actually even applying or, you know, to volunteer with those projects, is get something small and start on your own with a team of 1 or 2 or 3 people. But you need to know who got awarded that, and they are listed. So the mayor's office will post who got the projects, what the time frame is, and then you can find those people and ask them if you can help.
And I'll take this opportunity to say that I have a few projects going on, smaller scale, but outdoor. So if anyone wants to help, email me. All right. So Annabella has a question about the Dal de Verre project that got destroyed. She's asking, did insurance cover your time and materials cost to rebuild it?
Fortunately for me, I did not end up, I started the process of recovery. The town's insurance did cover both the time to rebuild the entire thing and the materials. However, much of that glass I had to recut some of it, but really I had to just dismantle it from the concrete slabs and then build all new slabs and all new molds. So I did get to save some of that glass and reuse it.
Okay, that's lucky.
Yeah, it was.
And currently our last question, we'll see if there are more that come up, but so A. Thompson, I'm not sure of the first name, is a teaching artist for the Maine Arts Commission, where apparently there is indeed a roster.
Oh, good.
And said that they've facilitated basic mosaics with a variety of community groups. And currently there's a project in a middle school where they're making mosaics. And they have a variety of donated materials. So the question is how to organize the different thicknesses in terms of grouting. They have thin glass and also thick tile.
You need to build indirectly, which means that you build face down. You take a cartoon, you flip the cartoon so that it is reversed. If you want a bird facing the right, you need to flip it over so that the bird faces the left, so that when you flip it back over, it faces right. And you need all your materials to go down on a fairly high-tack surface, inside out and backwards. And then you basically can back grout that and flip it all back over. Or
high-tack
you
meaning
can,
something sticky.
Yeah, high-tack tape is what I use. It's a bit more work, but all the material will be level. However, I have done plenty of projects in schools where the materials aren't level, but it can't be anything that you've cut, like glass, where somebody would run their hands over it and cut themselves. Everything has to be sanded and smooth.
Great. That is very helpful. So I would like to make a final call for questions. Does anyone have anything still pending that you would like to ask? No? Deb, is there anything that you forgot to say that the questions raised for you before we take one last question that came up?
I think that, I guess if I were to say anything, it is much more fun to collaborate on community projects and school projects. And it's not less, well, it is less stressful than doing public projects. And they're easier to build up your skills. And there's always somebody that knows more than you do. So it's a fun way to get to create mosaics, other than sometimes we get lost in our studios.
Yeah, good reminder. Okay, so we do have one more question, which is from Annette. They did some mosaic pavers that were actually slippery. So they were on porcelain tile. And the question is, how do you deal with that? They thought that the grout would work, but when it was wet, it didn't.
So I mentioned before, you need to research the materials before you use them. Here in our climate, if you do not have a quarry tile that is freeze thaw and high traffic safe, and you check the slip resistance when you pick materials, that's one of those times where if somebody gives you material and it doesn't work, you cannot use it, because people's health and welfare and safety are at stake. Make sure that the tile is rated for outside or for inside in slippery conditions. The other thing that you can do, and I've done this before, is you can take a sealer, an exterior grade sealer, and throw a little bit of very, very fine sand in the sealer, or just seal the tile and put sand on it, and it increases slip resistance, is what that will do. but that's going to require maintenance. So best thing is to use the correct material first, and really research the materials, the safety and the parameters of the materials. I am on the phone constantly with concrete companies, mold companies, and glass companies to give me specs, so that I can go back to people and let them know that they're safe and good to use.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, that is incredibly practical. I found it very helpful. I would like to thank you for the wonderful presentation and for answering our questions. And I'll turn it back to Amy to wrap up.
Thanks, and good night, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to thank everybody again for participating. We will be putting this up on the recording up on the web. So if you want to look at it again, you can go to our website and access it. Also, at the beginning of the webinar, I put up a PDF file that includes all the resources that Deb presented this evening. And we'll also have that up on the web as well. So thanks again, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.